Story time about how I found out my husband was seeing escorts while I was pregnant. Disclaimers that not my story time was sending me on Instagram. My husband and I have been married for 6 years. We had tried and tried for a baby, and we had a really hard time. The first 3 years of our marriage was hell. We tried so much to get pregnant, but we just couldn't do it. We went to the doctor, and that's when they told us that my husband had a little problem. So basically, he was the reason why we weren't able to get pregnant easily. Because of this, I had to undergo a lot of treatments. I started taking all this different medication, which really messed with my hormones. For the first time in my life, I got acne, I started to gain weight, and I also started getting mood swings. Unfortunately, my husband for some reason thought this was a character flaw of mine, and that basically I should just be able to control my emotions. I took him to the doctor so that the doctor could explain to him what was happening to my body. Finally, the doctor told him that everything that was happening to me was because of the medicine that I was taking for us to have kids. My husband decided to apologize to me and wanted to take me on a trip. He took me to Hawaii for 2 weeks, and it was beautiful. We ended up making up, and it was the best time ever. A month later, we found out that I was pregnant. My husband was the happiest I'd ever seen him. 2 weeks later, I started noticing weird things in our bank account. We started sending $5,000 to one person in particular every single story time about how I found out my husband was seeing escorts while I was pregnant. Disclaimers that not my story time was sending me on Instagram. That's when I noticed that every single month he would send somebody $5,000. It had been happening for 3 months. Right away, I was suspicious. A few months back, he and I had watched a documentary about escorts. And during the documentary, he kept judging all the women and the men. You know, acting greater than thou. And as soon as I saw the payments on our bank account, it's like a light bulb went off in my head. He must have seen that documentary and been like, wow, I know I can do that. Of course he can. My husband is a 40-year-old, good-looking, wealthy man. So that's when I started investigating. I had full access to his laptop, which had all of his text messages, as well as emails, and he never bothered to change his password on any of it. I waited for him to leave to the gym, and that's when I got on his laptop. I uncovered a whole ring of escorts. Not only was he sending money to one girl through our bank account, he was paying other girls through Bitcoin. As I was crying in front of the laptop, I had the presence of mind to start adding up all the money he had spent. In only 3 months, my husband managed to spend $55,000, and from what I could gather, he had about 5 escorts. Keep in mind, he's doing all of this while I'm pregnant. So here's what I did. I managed to contact each girl and ask for the money back. And I basically threatened to expose them. One was a teacher, the other was a model, which I could contact her agency and accuse her. One was actually a stay-at-home mom who was married. Only one responded to my messages. Part 3 is up. Story time about how I found out my husband was seeing escorts while I was pregnant. Disclaimers that not my story time was sending me on Instagram. Finally, one of the escorts got back to me, and she told me that she would give me all of the money back. My husband had given this girl $7,000 in the time span of 2 weeks. Then she spilled all the tea. She told me my husband had signed up to an escort website, and that he had anywhere between 10 and 15 girls. So there were other ways he was paying them, and I just didn't know about it. This is when I came to my senses. I told her she did not need to send the money back to him because it wasn't her fault. It was my husband's fault. Then this girl told me that my husband would talk bad about me to her, and that they would meet up at fancy hotels, and that's when he would tell her that I was a toxic wife, and that all I cared about was money. By the way, I make my own money. I told her I was pregnant, and she was mortified. I gathered up all the evidence, and I confronted my husband. That's when he said, finally, I don't have to hide it anymore. He told me that he didn't really think I would care. Since when? I asked him to tell me the truth and tell me how many girls he was seeing and how much money he had spent. And he confessed that he had seen over 20 girls and probably spent over $100,000. Then he asked me for a divorce. I'm kind of glad he did, because I was going to divorce him anyway. I am going to get his money and raise our child on our own. His family is trying to convince me otherwise, though. What should I do?
This is why you should never trust your friend if they tell you that their pet don't bite. Charla Nash would go over to her friend's house, Sandra, every now and then to watch over her 200-pound chimpanzee. Charla knew straight off the bat that she did not like that chimpanzee because it always scared her. There was even a time where the chimpanzee jumped on Charla's back and ripped out a chunk of her hair. Charla started crying, but her friend Sandra thought it was funny. Sandra would not be laughing at anything that chimpanzee did much longer after this day. One day, Charla gets a call from Sandra saying her chimpanzee wouldn't go back in the cage and she needed some help. Charla drove over there to help her friend, and immediately after, Sandra would have to call the police. By the time the police arrived, Charla was laying on the ground with half of her face eaten off, no jaw, her nose hanging from her face by a piece of her skin, and with both of her hands ripped off. This is what Charla looked like before her attack. Her entire face was mutilated after the attack, but since the photos are super graphic, they'll be posted on my Instagram story. Part 2 will include the unsettling phone call Sandra made to the police and how she described her friend getting eaten and ripped apart. This is going to be part 2 of why you should never trust your friend if they tell you that their pet don't bite. Sandra never imagined that after she called her friend over to help her put her 200-pound chimpanzee back in his cage, since he wouldn't go in, she would have to make a phone call to the police and report how her chimpanzee ate her friend alive. This is the audio clip.
Please!
What's the problem with your friend? I need to know.
Let the police up! With a gun! With a gun! Hurry
Who
up!
has a gun?
Please, hurry up! He's killing my girlfriend!
What is the problem?
He's killing my friend!
Who's killing your friend?
My chimpanzee!
Oh, your chimpanzee is killing your friend.
Yes! He ripped her apart! Hurry up! She's dead. She's dead.
Why are you saying that she's dead?
She's dead. He ripped her apart.
Charla actually ended up surviving. She was rushed to the hospital where they said she looked like she had gone through a meat grinder. Charla is very lucky to still be with us today. The most recent update about Charla is in her interview with Oprah that I have linked in my Instagram story.